Hello and welcome to amidst podcast with me, Rida Alwan.
Me, Naba Madani.
And today we have Huda Jawad.
Hello. A very inspiring activist. Did I get that right?
I am whatever you want me to be.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
How have you been?
Alhamdulillah, it's been tough times. Tough times where I don't know when the podcast will go out, but things are not great in the Middle East, and dealing with that is quite difficult. But we must find joy wherever we go. So I've got family, I've got loved ones, and they're good. Alhamdulillah. So that's all that matters.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Where were you born and how did you start your life?
I was born in Baghdad in 1977, and if anybody wants to send me a birthday card, it's 25th of April.
Noted.
I left Baghdad when I was 2.5. My father left first. He ran away. And then Mum followed with me and my 2-month-old sister, I guess a couple of weeks later, maybe 2 months.
Do you mind me asking why your father ran away?
Yes, he was wanted by Saddam Hussein's regime for organising protests and mobilising people. So
Against the regime?
yes, obviously. And
These were true allegations or was it just allegations?
oh no, he was an agitator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that wasn't a lie. But also him and Mum refused to be members of the Ba'ath Party, and you eventually hunt you down until you become. But no, they the night Dad fled was because we were coming back from my grandparents' house, my maternal grandparents' house, and Mum and Dad had just finished building their nice pad, I guess, and as they were driving into the road, they saw the mukhabarat waiting outside with several cars, and it wasn't police officers, it's actually mukhabarat officers. You know, it's a bad thing.
For our guest who don't know what mukhabarat is, do you have?
Yes, it's essentially the equivalent of the Iraqi Secret Service. And they were very distinguishable by their moustaches. If you are in the Middle East, you know the moustaches are a big deal, a big giveaway.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The Ba'ath moustache.
Yes, the back moustache. So, Mum spotted them, and she's like, "I think we need to turn around right now." And he's like, "Okay." So they turned around, and they headed back to my grandparents' house. And when initially my grandparents asked, "Why are you here? You just left." And they're like, "Oh, Huda's not feeling well, and we want your help." And I was the only child, obviously, then, because I was quite young and everything. And then eventually, Mum and Dad told my granddad that this has happened, and Granddad was like, "Right, here's some clothes, go." And they arranged for Dad to be driven across the border to Jordan, and he left.
Do you remember any of it?
No, but I have been told that I cried for months because I was a daddy's girl.
How old were you?
2.5.
Oh, very young.
Yes.
And Daddy went to...
Oh God, Baba, where did you go? You went to Jordan, you went to Damascus, So yeah, I think from Jordan he made it to Damascus after a couple of weeks, I think. And then we joined him, I think, for like maybe a week or two in Damascus. And then we made it to Abu Dhabi. And that's where we stayed for 5 years until the next time we had to run away.
And then you went to...
After running away from Abu Dhabi, we went to Damascus.
Okay.
And then after Damascus, we came to this country.
What year was that?
1988. Yeah.
You said you ran away from Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
What was the reason, if you don't mind me asking?
Again, politics. My parents were, obviously at that time, the Iran-Iraq war was raging.
Yes.
And Saddam Hussein was busy trying to, well, he sold himself as the protector of the Arabs against the Persians. And so all these Gulf states were significant strategic allies. And part of the agreement of like taking the hit for the Arabs, Saddam said that any Iraqi dissidents had to be returned. And mum and dad were at the time, not anymore, part of the Dawah party, which was supporting the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. And so dad was detained, arrested. We don't know what happened. He doesn't talk about it. But we were made homeless. We slept in cars. No one would take us in because that would put them in danger. Then we squatted. We found a place of an old sheikh who gave it to us. Well, he didn't give it to us. His assistants found us in this decrepit villa, and he was like, "What are you lot doing here?" So we met the guy, and he was like very nice and supportive. And so they took our passports away. We weren't allowed to stay in hotels. They chucked us out of our home. We couldn't stay with people for very long because they would be in trouble by association.
But you remember this?
Yes, I remember it. I remember very much what happened.
So
I remember the mouse that came up whilst we were sleeping.
Mouse?
Yeah, there was a little mouse in the derelict villa. And we were sitting and looking at it, and Mum was like, "Oh, girls, someone's come to visit." And we're like, "Who?" And she's like, "Look at that mouse." I mean, she's really good to remember, to be thinking on her feet like that, because I would be terrified as a parent now. So yeah, I remember this. Yeah. My formative years.
What would you say is your earliest memory? Would it be of these types of traumas, or?
I actually remember ice cream on the beach in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
And then being always sick after I had ice cream and having to take antibiotics for a week. But I always went for ice cream. It didn't stop me being sick.
I noticed you're smiling a lot while you're telling the story. It's quite horrific, the kind of conditions that you had to live through as a child. That must have had a profound impact on you, I guess, and your family.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, when you don't know anything else, like it just... And we are children, we don't have the words and probably the capacity to process and think, oh my God, this is terrible. I know this is bad. But as long as mum and dad were around, I was safe. So looking back on it, of course, this is trauma and stuff. And that, and you should be in therapy. Not to say that I didn't go to therapy afterwards as an adult, but I think it's the story of countless Iraqis, to be honest. So I'm not unique in any way. My generation, there are women, men, boys and girls who've been through a lot worse. So I count myself amongst the lucky ones.
Yeah, but as individuals, I think each of us experience this kind of trauma in our own way. Whereas, the displacement of Iraqis and diaspora in general has had, if you talk to any Iraqi who's from that generation, will tell you the same thing. So, it happened, everybody was in the same boat. We weren't the only one. But if you look back at it as an individual, your experience is completely unique to anybody else. And so you left Abu Dhabi and went to Damascus. And how long were you there for?
I think about 2.5 years. And then we came.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was your experience in Damascus?
It was mixed. Mum had been sick for a very long time. Of course, during all this madness, there was joy. My younger sister was born in 1988, and I adored her, and we all adored her, and she was our little doll, and she was fat and cute and chubby. But she was born by C-section. And And about 5 months after is when things started to go pear-shaped for Dad and Mum and us as a politically speaking. But before that, I think maybe 3 months, less than 3 months, 2 months after Mum gave birth, she developed jaundice, my mum. But it was misdiagnosed as something else. And so she ended up being in hospital for 2 months and on life support and possibly dying. So we didn't see Mum for 2 months.
And you had a new baby in the house.
Well, she was also taken away and to be fostered. But obviously, when you're a child, they don't tell you these things.
This is here in the UK?
No.
Jordan. Damascus.
Abu Dhabi.
Oh, Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. By a very lovely family who we adore. So when she came out, she was sick. And essentially, I was carer at the age of 7. And so when we went to Damascus, I carried on being carer for a while. But going to school was interesting. We did this thing where we would go from periods of extreme wealth to extreme poverty to kind of middle and then extreme wealth and extreme poverty. So I guess I count the Damascus time fondly because I actually we were living in actually the village where the Syrian revolution started, Maliha, with my uncle and his wife and my cousins. So that was really nice.
That's good to be around family, I guess.
And my grandma and everything. So that was lovely. And I went to an all-girls school and mixed with Syrian kids. But then Mum was sick for a lot of it.
So were you the one that was looking after the family?
Yeah, you kind of end up...
You're the oldest?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
There's 2 girls, 2 other sisters who are awesome. But yes, you kind of, you didn't think, oh, I am now the carer. And I think, Mama, I'm hungry. And she's like, okay, what you need to do is bring me this, put that there, turn that on, put some water on that. And then you kind of just end up
fulfilling a role.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
You become the parent, don't you?
Yeah. So, I mean, then she got better and everything, and that was
Alhamdulillah.
fine, alhamdulillah, and all of that stuff. But part of the reason why we came to the UK was also for her health needs, because she had several operations in Abu Dhabi that broke her body, basically. And so she had to get better, and the only way we can get better is to go somewhere where there was resources and sufficient medical care and people who knew what they were doing, stuff like that. So,
do you believe that Mom suffered all of these illnesses due to her traumas? Because what the mind suppresses, the body expresses, right?
yeah. Well, I guess the way we process our traumas is different individually, but also I think it's very gendered. I think Dad developed diabetes and blood pressure. But Mum had to do a lot of caring and looking after whilst Dad was not around. And being a woman in the Middle East without a man and kids is punishing, really. So you weren't just vulnerable because you didn't have the means to buy food or whatever, but your physical integrity is at risk. And there were several times when she relayed that to her friends when they were chatting, and I would hear. So it's a different kind of survival for a woman than it is for a man. I'm not saying that, my father wasn't attacked or his physical integrity wasn't at risk, but I think you're allowed to express it differently if you are a man and then you are a woman. I'm not sure if it's any better or worse. It's just different. Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure.
So
absolutely.
You came to the UK in 88.
Yes.
And then you went straight into school?
Well, there weren't no school places for me.
Okay.
So I was schoolless.
How old were you?
So I don't know. I'm rubbish at maths, but I just turned 10, I think, or 11.
Okay, so you'd be in like year 5, 6, or 4, 5, something like that.
No, I had just arrived. So if
Okay.
my birthday was in April,
Yeah.
we arrived in August.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, in 88. So, and yeah, we.
August, so September school year would have started, but
Yeah,
no
but
school spaces.
there's no spaces.
What about your sisters?
My younger sisters, both of them actually, I think Izzy was a bit too small to go to school, maybe, or maybe she wasn't. But Wafat went to school straight away, primary school, and she loved it. And I was at home for 2 months
Okay.
because there was no school place.
What was that experience for you, being at home, knowing your siblings are at school and you're at home?
Well, I wasn't really at home. I was living in a bedsit with mum and dad and my sisters. But I was just getting used to a new world because, you know, everyone talked a weird language. I was missing my BB. So yeah, I don't recall very much sort of feelings. I recall details, but
Yeah.
I think it was relatively okay.
And then you started school after 2 months?
Yes, we moved to Northwest London and I started at high school.
Okay.
So yeah.
How
I was the
that?
only Muslim in the village, which was really interesting. There was one other girl who was hijabi, and everyone thought I was her sister, even though she was East African.
Just because you wore a hijab,
Yeah,
so
well.
you got to be sisters.
yeah. It was interesting. I was petrified. I remember the first day sitting outside at the reception. I'd never been until primary school, I was in a mixed setting,
Okay.
school setting, but went to high school and it's massive and there was all these boys and girls and people of different creeds and colours and they're all talking really fast and I thought I knew 5 words in English, so but yeah, it took me a while. It took me a while to learn the language, to familiarize myself with the ways to like actually cross a corridor if there was a group of boys there, because I wouldn't move. I'd wait until they moved and then I would. So sometimes I was late for the lesson, which got me into trouble.
What was the phobia, or what stopped you?
I just never been around this many men before in a
Yeah.
school setting. And, you know, it's all haram this, haram that. And yeah, I was like, it just felt anxious.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt anxious. So I would not. And then there was, I had a special needs teacher who would sit with me to help me understand what was going on. And so a lot of what I did was she would sometimes say to me, oh, you know, they're doing this. It's particularly in English because I didn't speak English. You tell me what, you know, write me a story about X or Y, and we would write it. And then I just remember what I'd wrote in school in Syria, and I think, oh, I'll just write that one. So I didn't feel, it was strange. There was like a bit of bullying. There was a bit like, who am I? What is this place? When can we go home? But you just have to get on with it. So you do. And then it was all right. I formed friends and had a clique and a group of misfits, which was nice. Then I stopped having the classroom assistant because my English got better. They moved me up sets so I could express myself, so they knew that actually I wasn't needing of sort of extra support and stuff. And then, yeah, did my A-levels, went to uni, and then the rest is history, as they say.
What did you study at uni?
I did psychology and sociology. And then I worked for a couple of years, and then I went back to do a master's. I did international studies and diplomacy. And then I was before the pandemic hit, I was going to go back, but the pandemic hit. And so
Go
I
back to.
was going to do a PhD, but
Mm.
yeah, maybe one day, inshallah.
Inshallah,
Yeah.
why not?
I know.
Why not?
Yeah.
How was uni?
Oh, it was horrible. I hated it. There was no Arabs or Iraqis.
Which
or
uni did you go to?
I went to, oh God, it's changed names several times. Roehampton Institute, which then became Roehampton Surrey, which I think now is Surrey University, part of Surrey University.
It's now an independent.
What is it
it's
now?
Roehampton University.
Oh,
Yeah.
well done!
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, it was funny. I met amazing friends, but I was looking for like a uni experience.
Yeah.
And you can't have it if you stay at home, really.
No.
And you don't do pub crawls or student union staff or club nights or whatever.
Freshers Week.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Or go to the union bar or whatever. And I also, when you did find somebody like the Muslim Society or whatever, it was so Shia-phobic. It was like, oh my God, I just don't belong. So yeah.
So I'm assuming APSOC wasn't around.
There was no APSOC.
There was no APSOC, okay.
Yeah, there was no APSOC. So yeah, it was.
So you finished uni and started working?
Yeah, oh God, you're taking me back years. I did. I think I applied to a gazillion jobs. I think I did teaching assistant for a while.
Primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Okay.
You must have a lot of patience.
No, I didn't last long. Especially because I was scared of the students. It doesn't help. It doesn't help to like. And then I think I sold Christmas cards for a while.
Sorry, Christmas cards?
Yeah.
Random.
So
As in you were making them, designing them?
no,
or?
no. I just like a glorified stall
Okay.
in a. So there was this charity called Charities Aid Forum or something that raised money for charities by selling Christmas cards, and they would have like stalls in universities or churches or whatever. And then I remember I had a stall. I had to woman a stall in Westminster University, and all these Muslims would come up to me and say, "Sister, this is very bad. Why are you selling Christmas cards?" I was like, "Yeah, but he says our prophet." And they were like, no, you shouldn't be selling Christmas cards. And then at the time, I was also actually throughout my A-levels, I was working at the Al-Khoui Foundation in the media relations office. And I stopped doing that, I think. And then I got a job at a think tank, I think it was. What did I do? Social services. Sorry. I worked at Harrow Social Services. Then I went back to uni and then I got the think tank job. That's what happened, yeah.
Well done. And so do you feel like out of everything you've done, what was, at that point, what was your favorite part of your journey at that point?
Work-wise, I think I really, really enjoyed my master's. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was brilliant.
What made it enjoyable?
Subject matter was really fascinating.
Okay.
Any particular part of the subject or just?
I liked the way the intersection between sort of strategy, people skills and diplomacy and sort of history and sociology. It kind of brought all these things together, particularly when we were doing things like, I don't know, UN conference games and, all of that stuff, or when we were had to do interviews and pretend to be a sort of a freedom fighter / terrorist being interviewed by the West or whatever. So that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting.
It started to give you a different perspective on things, or?
No, it just it was something I knew because I watched it brought a hidden part of life into public view, which it wasn't hidden because it was a secret. It was hidden because the society I was living in didn't know anything about this stuff. Didn't know anything about conflict resolution. Didn't know anything about what it's like to be in the middle of a war, what it's like to be a refugee. It was all like something that I, as an individual, experienced in a space where people sort of worried about their cornflakes, or, I don't know what film they were watching, or I didn't have that luxury at that age.
What the weather was.
Although we did very quickly talk about the weather when and I knew I became British then.
So what would you classify yourself as? Are you Iraqi, British Iraqi, Iraqi British? What would you identify yourself in that sense?
That question I find very triggering, because racists ask me that all the time, particularly just at the start of, just after 9/11. The amount of journalists or interviewers or well-meaning liberals or not very well-meaning liberals would say, but are you British or are you Muslim? And I was like, you don't ask me if I am a woman or a daughter, do you? I'm both. And so these kind of binaries don't really are not my natural state of being. I don't think like that, so I can't answer you. I am all of these things and nothing, because it means I don't know what somebody else's conception of British or Iraqi is. Many more Iraqis who I've met who haven't spent their childhood in the UK or away from Iraq would say, you're not a proper Iraqi. Somebody said that to me. And I got highly offended. But then I'm not English. I am a form of British, but some people don't think I'm British either. But I don't care what everybody else thinks.
That's really interesting. That's a really good point, actually. I think you never ask a first generation white man in South Africa if you're like white South African or British South African. You'll just say you're South African, right?
Yeah.
They will just say they're South African. But us, we have to say what we are. Why?
Well, I think because I'm a Muslim, and my source of Islam is the Quran, and the Quran describes the world in very systemic ways. So there is a system operating in the universe, which some of it is open to us, some of it is not very obvious, and the more we sort of research and do scientific discoveries, all that becomes clear. But yeah, in this system of society, if you are not of the dominant group that is sort of in charge of things, you have to prove you belong. But if you have privilege of being the one who sets the tone of the culture or the narrative, you don't need to prove anything. You just own whatever it is, wherever you are, it's yours.
So we've gotten to the stage where you finished, or you're in the think tank.
Yes.
And how did that go? And then where did you go from there? Because you go on to a lot more interesting stuff.
Think tank was very interesting. What happened? I was working on bringing the voices of civil society in the Middle East to the West and creating better dialogue and understanding. Then I was asked to apply for this job for this charity that was setting up, where you worked specifically on two issues: the Israeli-Palestinian lack of peace process and the sort of what I would call capacity building and supporting Muslim communities, grassroots Muslim communities in the UK, to have a better experience of being in this country, and building links between the establishment, the British establishment, whether that's media, politicians, funders, etc. And then I did that for 5 years, and it was amazing, and I loved it, and I just went places and met amazing people. But then I also got married, and I had a baby.
Congratulations.
Thanks. He's 16 now. And he introduced me to a world I had never known. And that world was very rich, but my work and setup was incompatible with that. So I had to make a decision: sanity or work and child. And it was a close call, but in the end, my body told me, "Now, come on, you know what you need to do." So I left that dream job, and fell into feminism. And so I got a job as a research coordinator for a domestic violence charity that was doing this innovative research that's never been done in the UK, where we tracked 100 women who've just either sought support from this charity or have left their violent partner. And we followed them for 3 years to see what life was like once you decide to get support and recognize that you are a victim of domestic abuse.
So was that So were you there from the beginning of the 3-year process?
Yes. I recruited the women. I, supported with their interview process. I maintained relationships with them. I was there for their interviews. I've heard hours and hours of horrific stories of women's lives, but also their resilience and power. And so, it was a very precious experience.
Do you classify yourself as a feminist because of it, or before it, or how do you?
I think words are really important, but they're also very problematic depending on who you speak to. So,
what is the meaning of feminism to you? I think.
So what I continually say is, no one would be ashamed of describing themselves as anti-racist. It's not a controversy, unless you, I don't know, even Reform. Even Tommy Robinson would say that they're not racist, because it's not something to be ashamed of. It's a noble cause. What does being anti-racist mean? Believing that everyone has the right to a fair and safe life. Mm-hmm. That's what feminism to me means. Believing that regardless of your sexuality and gender and sex, you have the right to a safe and free life.
See, that word is thrown around a lot, feminist. I'm a feminist. And since the Me Too movement, it's been, I think, misused a lot. Okay. And I feel like men are completely targeted by these groups that call themselves feminist and completely isolated. And to some extent, cancelled. Their views are not matters, because the actual word is misused, Okay. These groups that say, "Oh, I'm a feminist, it's all about women," and then they completely shy out the men. I find it really upsetting, actually. I think the term feminist has a deeper meaning than what's thrown around these days. And I think that what makes me really angry about people that use the word feminist, because what are you using it for? Are you trying to cancel men out? Because we are all equal in the eye of God. We are all equal. And we're created in his image, right? Do you find that?
Maybe?
Sorry?
Maybe her image?
There we are. Well, that's another thing about the Arabic language, right? We don't know. Yeah. We would like to take a moment to tell you about our sponsors, Mainstay. Mainstay Foundation provides development aid, educational support, and faith-strengthening initiatives around the world. They support orphan children to ensure that their overall well-being is being met. By supporting an orphanage, we can ensure that the children have a nurturing environment to grow and evolve. As little as £30, you can provide an orphan with the tools to change their future. The link is in the bio. Do you find that's true? Do you find the word feminist is misused a lot?
I find that people are really complicated, and they're happy to be to learn and to understand and share their stories. I think the way we hear about people's stories is through a medium called the media or social media that is really not interested in nuance or complexity. They just want to tell a very simple story. And so it's a bit like when the media has its narrative around Islam and Muslims as being just solely bloodthirsty terrorists who they just are angry all the time about anything and everything, and they feel offended by Christmas or whatever, which is absolutely not true. And I think I would ask is, where do we get our understanding of these meanings? Where do we hear them? Who is using them, these words? But when, the word is problematic for a lot of people because it's describing something that everyone has known and has maybe felt since the moment of creation. So it's not a new phenomena, but naming it is quite new. We don't have a name for it in our culture. I mean, the translation is niswiya in Arabic.
Oh, interesting.
But even that doesn't really capture what it's supposed to mean. Ultimately, feminism is a way of looking at the world that says the world is structured, or social relations are structured in a way that put a particular category of human at a lower level of power and creates vulnerability because of their biology. And you may choose not to believe the world is structured that way. That's absolutely everyone's choice. But part of the academic research and perspective of feminism is to prove that there is examples of this structuring, and there are numerous. And so for us as human beings, we don't often think of the world in a bird's eye view. We think of it as like, this is my life right now, this is happening to me or my family or my kinsmen or whatever, or kinswomen, but we don't think of like these structures because we're human, we're individual, and we relate in groups. So most people might experience these examples of discrimination at a very individual level, but they wouldn't put it together and look at it as a structure or as a system. And I think I really did not understand that until I became a mother and looked at the instances of discrimination, these individual moments that have happened very frequently, every day, all the time, with anyone I speak to. I put it all together and there's a pattern. There's a pattern that because of my child or because of the fact I am a mother, there's a particular way I'm allowed to be in the world. There are certain choices I'm allowed to have or not have. There are certain jobs I have to do that I didn't have to do before. There are certain boundaries and things that I had to cross or not cross or whatever. And so I think that's what really, I always say my son made me a feminist, because he gave me that consciousness that I've started to think, oh, hang on a minute. No one ever said that to me before. Why are they saying that to me now? What do you mean I have to, why should I be up all night and my husband gets to go to bed? Why? He's his son as well, isn't it? And that kind of, why do I have to tidy the house, make the dinner, make sure the baby's fed, put him to sleep, and appear to be enjoying all this stuff? And it wasn't my husband or my family, but it was the society, the TV programs, it was the social media, that, you have to be this Islington mum with the latest pram and, at the hairdressers, getting done, having coffee with the other mums. I'm like, what is that? I don't know what that is. I've never seen it before.
Social conditioning, right?
Yeah. And, you know, again, it's, what if I don't enjoy pushing a pram? And I remember like the first time I got on public transport with a pram, it was horrific. And everybody looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? How can you not know how to push a pram or get it on the bus? I was like, I've never done this before. There's no school of pramming, you know?
Yeah, there's no manual when you have kids.
And like, why do you assume that I'll know? Like, you would never say that to my husband. It'd be like, oh, poor man, he's trying to push the pram and get it on the bus. Let's help him. Whereas I was judged for not maneuvering the pram properly and smoothly onto the bus because I should know this stuff. Yeah, but I've never done it before, so why would I know it? And that kind of very micro stuff really made me realize, And then hearing the stories of the women and, just kind of really crystallized that view that there is an injustice here. There is an injustice that must be seen and must be tackled, and it's not okay, regardless of your faith or your creed or your race. This is not about white people or Western people or a religion. This is about basic fitra in Islam or in Arabic.
How do you translate that?
Human nature. I am born with a sense of justice. I'm born to know when something is not quite right. Like it's on a cellular level, I feel it. And that's what I felt. That's why I'm into fighting for women, because there is an injustice that is unacceptable by the natural order of things, by God, and it has to be tackled. And that's my mission, is to be part of that struggle.
Obviously, you took that group of 100 women and you followed them for 3 years. How did that affect your psychology, your mental power, your stresses, your view of the world?
Yeah, it had a profound impact. You know, I'd come home really heartbroken and upset at their stories of just, you know, but also very have a sense of connection to them and to the organization and all the women who were working, and men, not very often that we saw men working in this field, but all the men and women who would support them and try to fight for them. But also on an interpersonal level, you'd come home and think, what's happening here then? Is this pattern of injustice being repeated at home or in my relationships with others and stuff? And so part of the job was getting something called clinical supervision, where you come and debrief about because otherwise the mental load is unbearable. So I found it both heartbreaking but completely I became so passionate about it, and it was so enriching. And I felt like, that my whole kind of career made sense now. All the different strands of the different jobs that I've had have kind of all acquiesced in one space. And I felt that my spirituality, my work ethic, my work experience, my interests all came together beautifully in one place. And I felt that I think I know my calling now.
That sounds so lovely.
It's like you found yourself.
I found a place that explains the events that I couldn't name, or the discrimination or the injustices I felt, the deep injustice that I felt like, why couldn't I go back to my job in this after giving birth? Okay, I don't assume that I will be able to perform in the same way, although I did for over a year. But in order for me to not have a mental breakdown, I was expected to change the things that I've done before. Like I had to find a part-time job. I can't do this to work full-time. That's fine. I don't mind working less. But it meant there were no part-time jobs at a senior level. I had to regress in order to accommodate my sanity and the needs of my child. Okay, fine. But even if you did work, you had to go and get childcare if you worked part-time. But then all your money went on childcare because childcare is very expensive. And so I was working essentially for many years to pay for childcare at a level that I had surpassed 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And my salary took a hit. And I was like, but this is supposed to be like 21st century and we're all equal. Because when a man has a baby, research proves his salary increases because he's seen as a family man and he gets promotions more easily and is considered a stable, solid professional. And I was like, that's deeply unfair and unjust. And I'm not saying the men in my life were enjoying this difference. They didn't know it. I mean, my husband, bless him, he could not stop hearing about it. I mean, go on and on. But again, this is the way society is structured.
I'm just going to ask maybe a controversial question.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a feminist.
Yes.
And you've heard these horrific stories of these disgusting men doing some disgusting things to women. And it's giving you a very negative view of men.
Yes.
And I know, not to generalize, but did it make you generalize that all men were like this? Or how did it make you feel? Because I'm personally disgusted by any form of abuse to women. And it's just sort of, I'm totally against it and everything. But then there are times where I've spoken to feminists, like, all of you men are like this. But it's, no, we're not all like this. And I feel that it's not fair for us to be put under that same bracket.
No, yeah.
And so it's like when obviously you've worked very closely with these 100 women and you've got this really bad perception of men. I know your husband is a great person, your father's a great person. These are all men in your life
Yes.
who are great role models towards men.
Yes.
But it's just, how did that...
No, of course it impacts your view of the world. But again, feminism is not about one person. Feminism is a recognition that there is a system that makes all of us behave in a certain way and that men don't benefit, like men are harmed by it too. Because if it can turn a man to doing these abusive behaviors, that's dehumanizing. That's not okay. That's taking away from the man's, agency and potential. But also, feminism is not just about the most heinous of forms of abuse and violence. Feminism is an explanation of a continuum of being. So the men who commit the abuse are not monsters and individual. There are some are evil, and absolutely, but these are if 1 in 3 women experience this, these are men that I talk to that do this. These are men that I hold dear. These are ordinary people doing good things, but they also behave this way. And it's about understanding that abuse and violence is on a continuum, and it starts with privilege and it ends with harm. And we are all privileged in some way, shape or form. I am able-bodied. I can move, I can walk right now out of this room. I have no problem. But somebody who is not able to use their legs doesn't have that privilege. So I think it's about understanding that there are small behaviors that we are conditioned to do as individuals that lead to a particular way of being in the world, and it harms men so much that it makes them become these perpetrators of harm and violence that no one wants to be around. And you could do a sexist joke at a football match. You're not that one who's beaten up the woman or has raped her. But the man who does heard you laugh at that joke and he thinks, well, yeah, that's okay. So, and I'm not saying every joke is sexist and we must stand against. I'm just saying it's a really difficult. Again, we're humans and we are engaged in difficult conversations and behaviors. And so anyone who says, oh, it's just this or that is not actually telling you a reflection of reality. It's very difficult. But no, I don't hate men because I have 2 of them that I gave birth to. And they are extremely feminist. And I have amazing men in my life, uncles, my father, my husband, my cousins, that are just shining examples of what men should be. And because I have them, I know that patriarchy harms men and it harms them. And, and feminism, depending on which type of feminism and who's using it, harms women too. Mm. So it depends on, your type of worldview and type of feminism. So that's why I would describe myself as an intersectional Muslim feminist who recognizes things like racism and white supremacy and ableism and class and money as being all contributing to the type of life that you lead.
And if you were to go to Iraq,
I have
to work there and to, some of this amazing work that you've done, would you take it there?
I'd love to. And I'd love to, but there are amazing women that do this work in Iraq already. Mm. They're brilliant and they operate on much more difficult conditions than I do. But no one's going to care about feminism if they can't feed their kids. So, absolutely. And if they can't keep their families safe. But it's not like, oh, I'll feed my kids first and then I'll take them to school and then I'll worry about women's rights. Women's rights decide who gets fed out of the kids, who gets to go to school. And it's so it starts from the minute that you have the need, that meeting a need is as and your perspective on who is worthy when there's not enough impacts that too. So.
You spoke a few minutes ago about football.
Yes.
And there was a petition that you were involved in.
Yes.
Explain to us.
Yes. Like many women, I like football. And it was, and I love tournaments. Tournaments are the best because you do get into a festival atmosphere, absolutely, don't you? Yeah. And you worry about the tables and the groups and who's playing who and all of that stuff. So I don't really support a particular team, though Brentford are all right. But I like supporting countries. So there was the Euros in 2020 that took place in 2021 because of the pandemic. My friends that live, one in Manchester, the other one in Oxford, came down to London for the first time since the pandemic with her daughter. And I said, I'll meet up. And then my friend in Oxford said, I'll come too. And we met up, and one of us, Shyster, who lives in Oxford, was like, we have to watch the Ukraine-England match. And we're like, oh, right then. But there was nowhere to watch it because it was the pandemic, things were closed, you had to book places and whatever. But there was the hotel bar, which basically was the size of this studio, with tables and people and screens. So we watched it. And Shyster did a tweet that said 3 hijabis walk into a bar, which was a riff on the 3 lions and the jokes about 3 whatever walk into a pub or a bar. And she, in her tweet, she did a thread about why football is a really important aspect of society, the power of it to bring people together, the particular features and distinguishing qualities of the current England, well, at the time, the current England team and their manager, and how that really, in times of crisis and anxiety like the pandemic, gives us a sense of hope. That tweet went viral. Then she wrote an article in The Guardian about it, and then there was interest from the media. And England got through to the finals, and we said, if England get through to the finals, you can all come to my house, my flat in Wembley, and we'll watch it together. So they did. And then we lost, unfortunately, and the 3 black players missed a penalty, which then resulted in a huge backlash and racist sort of outburst from people within a couple of minutes of them losing. And so we decided to write a petition to publicly repel and reclaim the narrative around racism in football, particularly that this squad was really special. He was a young black men who have done extraordinary things for ordinary people during the pandemic, who gave people a sense of, and they came from humble backgrounds, and they really were well-behaved young men. You know, I sound like an old mum, but you know, in the 90s, we had like Gaza and all these mad footballers who went on drunken sort of rants and drove cars and hit them into roads and trees and things like that. And it was all the wags this and all of that stuff, real frivolous. And I mean, which is fine, because if you're young and you've got money, what are you going to do with it? But these boys were like worrying about feeding kids at school. They were talking about poverty. They were taking the knee for Black Lives Matter. They were, you know, talking about the most vulnerable. They were talking about immigrants. They were talking about the poor, and, you know, doing all sorts of things behind the scenes to support people. And we just thought, no, you can't do that to them. So we have a duty to do something about it. And so we did the petition, and then we found out that within 24 hours we went up to 1 million. Or within 48 hours, we went up to 1 million. And and then we ended up with 1.2 million. And the rest is history, basically.
Done. Thank you. And I think you're talking about Rashford, right?
Yes, Rashford, Sancho.
It's because I'm a United supporter. That's why. Rashford's our boy.
He's a good one.
Oh.
Yes, he's a good man.
So what we tend to do is our last podcastee asks the next person a question.
Oh, okay.
So the question was,
what is your superpower?
Oh, what is my superpower? I think, believe I have many superpowers, to be honest, but I'll share one with you. I'm really stubborn.
That is really interesting.
You're not the first person to say that.
Not the first person.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting, no?
Very interesting.
Yeah, but in a really nice way. I care that people are not offended by my stubbornness. But if I want something, I'll get it done.
And what would you ask our next guest?
What if you weren't here right now and you were living your best life, where would you be?
Very good question.
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Where would you be?
Oman. That's where I'd be. On a beach in Oman. Looking at turtles, I think.
Oh,
Lovely.
wonderful. Where would you be?
Where would I be? That's a very good question. I'm very passionate about helping people to take them to the next level from a business point of view.
Oh, okay.
So I would be helping organizations, taking them, charities, businesses, organizations, taking them to the next level, making them see what they can't see. I've got a unique view of how to grow things.
Mm.
And
You're a cultivator.
yes. I don't see problems, I see solutions.
Very good.
So it's I'd like to be somewhere hot as well.
Yeah, it would be nice.
So
Yeah,
nice.
not racist would also be nice. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
What about yourself? Where would you be?
Oh, I don't know. I'd be traveling around the world, helping people, giving people voices, listening to their stories. I love listening to people's stories. I love giving people space so they can process whatever they are carrying with them, and just give them a voice. Really, like everyone has a story to tell, right?
Absolutely.
This is why we're doing this.
Exactly why we're here. Exactly why we're here.
But thank you so much for today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's lovely hearing your story.
Thank
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. It's been a true blessing to have you here with us.
Oh, that's so kind.
we've
It's
learned so
wonderful
much.
It's wonderful to have this platform. It's really great that you also were stubborn enough to do it and decide that it was something that you wanted to do, because I think it's the power of our stories. That's how in the Quran it's all about stories. That's how we learn. So if we can talk more and share more stories, then we can make things richer, and maybe one person's story is like a guide for somebody else's troubles.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.